What if I told you that the single most powerful tool for leadership influence isn't your MBA, your strategic thinking, or even your years of experience? As a professional opera singer, I'm tapped into the voice in a way that few others are. I spent over a decade learning to command rooms not with volume, but with resonance. I learned to project my voice over a full orchestra without strain or a microphone, and to hold the attention of an audience of thousands with a single sustained note. And when I transitioned to executive coaching, I discovered something profound. The same acoustic principles that allow opera singers to captivate audiences are the exact same mechanisms that determine leadership influence. Here's what research reveals. Within 80 milliseconds of hearing you speak, people form impressions about your competence, intelligence, trustworthiness, and leadership ability that influence every subsequent interaction. That's less than a tenth of a second, which is faster than you can blink. And those impressions create what psychologists call the halo effect, where one trait colors perception of everything else. So a resonant, confident voice doesn't just make you sound credible, it makes people perceive you as more intelligent, more competent, and more worthy of following across all dimensions. So your voice amplifies your total halo effect at the speed of sound. Your vocal presence creates a neurobiological response that determines whether people want to listen, trust, and follow you. So it's happening in both your brain and in your body. EEG studies show that attractive voices trigger enhanced neural processing in listeners' brains. There's larger responses that indicate heightened attention, more emotional engagement, and reward activation. So, in other words, they pay attention to you and they feel good doing so. But here's what most leaders miss: the opposite is also true. Poor vocal presence sabotages perception of your intelligence and capability, no matter what you actually know. So let's get specific about the stakes here. CEOs, for example, with deeper voices, manage larger companies and earn significantly higher salaries than their higher pitched counterparts, even when taking other factors into consideration. A group of researchers at Yale found that founders who sounded passionate and warm when pitching dramatically increased their funding probability. Federal Reserve studies showed that when Fed chairs spoke with upbeat tones, share prices responded more favorably. So your voice literally affects your compensation, your funding, and your market influence. Think about the last executive meeting you attended. Who commanded attention? Whose ideas were taken seriously? I'd wager voice played a bigger role than the quality of the ideas themselves. Research on executive presence reveals that nearly 40% of how people interpret your leadership presence comes from vocal delivery alone. Not credentials, not track record, voice. Multiple studies confirm that both men and women prefer leaders with lower pitched voices, associating them with competence and trustworthiness. Voice pitch directly influences leadership selection across contexts, from elections to military promotions to corporate promotions. Successful operatic singing depends on a lot of factors, but none more so than a singer's ability to create the singer's formant. This is an acoustic phenomenon, which is a concentration of acoustic energy that allows trained singers to project clearly over a full orchestra without forcing or straining. So it's not about volume, it's about resonance, which comes as a result of shaping the vocal tract. There's three parts of your vocal instrument: the motor, the vibrator, and the resonator. And the singer's formant comes from shaping the vocal tract so that it amplifies specific frequencies that the human ear is naturally attuned to. And here's what's remarkable: research shows that trained singers maintain this enhanced resonance not just when singing, but during normal speech. So we have rewired our vocal production to create what listeners describe as brilliance, ring, and presence in the voice. We've developed sophisticated mind body integration that allows conscious shaping of vocal output. Now, you're not going to need to sing in your next board meeting or discovery call or negotiation or TED Talk or podcast appearance. but the principle is directly applicable. When you develop conscious control of vocal resonance and projection, you're accessing the same acoustic frequencies that capture attention, convey authority, and create the neurobiological conditions for influence. You don't need to become an opera singer, but you can learn to use the same acoustic principles that have commanded audiences for centuries. This is largely what I work on with my clients, this understanding of physical mechanics of vocal power combined with the neuroscience of influence. But even those who are in positions of power don't often feel comfortable using their full voice, figuratively or literally. But why is this? Because somewhere along the way, we learned to silence ourselves. Maybe, for example, it's the meeting where your idea was talked over, or the presentation where you see people checking their phones, a negotiation where you felt dismissed before you finished your first sentence. Those are just professional examples, and we've got 1,000 other that show up in our personal lives. Your voice tells the world who you are, and it reflects your entire physical, neurological, and emotional state. So when you're stressed, or when you're holding back, or when you're playing small, your voice reflects that. It literally constricts. You lose resonance, you lose range, you lose presence. Many leaders unconsciously learned it's not safe to take up space. It's not safe to express fully. It's not safe to be truly heard. There's research on what's known as psychogenic voice disorders, which are voice problems with no medical cause, and it consistently identifies that there is this conflict over speaking out as the central issue for those who are affected. Trauma, chronic stress, unexpressed emotion all inhibit natural vocal expression. And this is what results in what some people call monotone or restricted or hesitant patterns of voice use, even though there's no physical damage. This is this is a learned inhibition that manifests as diminished vocal presence. And listeners' brains instantly interpret this as diminished leadership capability. So ask yourself, when was the last time that you spoke with full conviction? No hedging, no softening, no making yourself small. If you can't remember, then you've probably lost access to your vocal power. So why does the voice have this extraordinary power, though? Simply put, here is what happens when you successfully persuade someone. Their brain literally synchronizes with yours. And your voice is the primary vehicle that activates specific neural networks, the ones that are responsible for social cognition and for understanding others' perspectives. So the quality of your vocal delivery creates neural signatures that guide others' mental and emotional states. Effective persuaders exhibit distinct brainwave patterns during communication. There's increased delta and theta activity, which indicates heightened emotional regulation and focused attention. This state of presence is heard and felt in our voice. So when you speak with conscious vocal control, you're not just communicating information, you're directly shaping how others think and feel, including yourself. So speaking with your full voice also allows for you to change your own state, similar to changing your posture from something slouched to something more open and confident. This is why content alone in communication never wins. Two leaders can present identical strategies, but the one with vocal presence gets buy-in. The one without gets polite nods and no action. But developing vocal power isn't about learning to sound deep or mimicking TED Talk speakers. It's about integrating emotional intelligence with vocal expression. People with higher emotional intelligence have enhanced brain connectivity in regions that process vocal emotion. And it's this neural architecture that allows for leaders with a high EQ to authentically modulate their tone, pitch, rhythm, and intensity to express the confidence, empathy, enthusiasm, and conviction that you want in a leader that you're going to follow. Did you know that your audience's brains can detect your authenticity? When your voice authentically expresses your emotional state and it aligns with your message, then it creates trust and connection. When it doesn't, when you are faking enthusiasm or suppressing doubt, people sense the incongruence even if they can't articulate why. This is a key difference between manipulation and influence or leadership. Manipulation tries to fake vocal qualities, But true influence develops the integration of emotional awareness and authentic expression and conscious vocal control. Manipulation is about getting people to do something they don't want to do that's not in their best interest. Leadership is about getting people to believe in themselves enough to go out of their comfort zones to accomplish a goal they want to achieve. Leaders who master this integration are consistently rated as more motivating, more trustworthy, and more effective, and thus are able to drive measurably better team performance. Now, the extraordinary part about all of this is that it's completely trainable, unlike height or facial structure or many of the other traits that can create halo effect. Vocal presence can be consciously developed. When you integrate acoustic resonance and emotional intelligence and authentic expression, the same principles that I learned on opera stages that apply to executive communication, then you're activating the neurobiological mechanisms that transform how others perceive and respond to you. You're creating the halo effect that enhances all other perceptions. You're triggering the synchronization that enables genuine persuasion. You're building the executive presence that determines leadership success. Ancient wisdom in all traditions understood the power of the voice. The sacred syllable Om was considered the primordial vibration of creation. Modern quantum theories of consciousness suggest consciousness itself may operate as a vibrational phenomenon. What ancient traditions knew intuitively, neuroscience now proves. Your voice is the bridge between inner consciousness and outer reality. What would change in your leadership if you commanded attention the moment that you spoke? If your voice authentically conveyed the competence and the vision that you know you possess? If people's brains automatically processed you as credible and worth following, what would change in your world? Your voice shapes leadership perception. It activates neural mechanisms of influence. It creates halo effects that determine opportunity and directly impacts career trajectory and compensation. So you have a choice. Continue letting unconscious vocal habits limit your influence, or consciously develop the vocal presence that matches your capability and your vision. The voice is your instrument, and it's your instrument of transformation. It's your tool for creating influence, for building trust, for inspiring action. So the question is, are you ready to master it? If you're a leader who knows that you are capable of more impact, but it feels like something invisible is holding you back, then it might be your voice. I take my clients through a variety of frameworks to help them build up this conscious control of their voice in a way that is totally holistic and results in an authentic, commanding, charismatic voice that doesn't sound like you're trying too hard. If you want to speed up the process of finding and unleashing your voice, download any of the resources that are linked in the notes of wherever you are listening to this, or send me a message on Instagram or Twitter about coming to work with me in a vocal influence workshop.